is a place called Picayune Strand State Forest. This is the Sable Palm Road entrance. And I expect it to be fairly wet. This is a main hiking area, I guess. Although hiking and this kind of stuff is brutal this time of year. We haven't fully gotten into a real part of dry season yet, and it just rained a couple nights ago, so this could be muddier and dirtier than I'm hoping. Just taking a quick trip through and talking some Jeep while I'm coming past. 12:50 New Year's Eve. Currently at 70,078 miles in less than 3 years. Let's go through a list of the issues I've had in 70,000 miles. So a quick rundown of some of the issues. So with about 2,000 miles or so, I replaced my differential covers front and rear. I knew I was going to be taking a long distance trip. Just wanted to swap over to something a little stronger, a little nicer looking. When I did that, I noticed the front differential fluid was extremely low. Didn't think anything of it. Went on my long distance trip. After about 3,500 miles on the return trip, when I got back into Florida, I noticed a resistance or a slight resistance to forward movement from a stop. And at that time it was raining like hell, so I just assumed it was due to the water pounding up on the roads in typical Florida monsoon style. I noticed after a few hours when it stopped raining, I was still getting that weird feeling of resistance. Not quite as strong as a brake being on, but something was definitely not right. I could feel it. So when I got home, I went through everything and found out that my transfer case fluid was burned up and extremely low. It was way short of where it should be. My transfer case was low from the factory a good quart, if not more. And there's no way that it burned up a quart of fluid. Once I changed it, I flushed my transfer case, filled it again, drove it for about 1,000 miles, flushed it. From that point forward, I haven't had that reoccurrence, and I've taken 4 more long distance trips now. I am 100% convinced that my transfer case was way underfilled from the factory and would have caused me problems had I not checked it when I did, which was at about 7,000 miles. That was the first kind of issue I had. I guess it was about 10,000 miles or so. I started getting a slight vibration up in the front right. Had my wheels rebalanced and checked, alignment checked, and it ends up my drag link was failing. So they replaced the drag link. That took care of that problem. Then about 20,000 miles, I noticed that when I was on dirt roads and roads like this, I was getting a wiggle. It was wigglier than I thought it should be and was used to. So I started checking into some things myself before I brought it to the dealer and found out that my stock steering stabilizer had failed. That was about 20,000 miles. I replaced the stock steering stabilizer with a Fox ATS 2.0 two-stage steering stabilizer, and it's adjustable. And that made a huge difference. It not only did it bring it back to the stock feel, it made it better than stock. And it made it definitely feel more progressive when I was turning in dirt and on rocks in the mud. It just brought a much more stable and smooth feel in those transitions, especially when I was getting close to full lock. One other issue I started noticing about 20,000 or so was the paint on the engine cover. The gold paint was flaking off on one side, on the passenger side. Then about, I guess it was about 50,000 miles, the oil coolant hose blew. I was driving, looked over and saw my gauge, my voltage gauge was going red, green, red, green, red, green. Immediately pulled over into an auto zone. When I opened up the hood, there was antifreeze spraying everywhere. And at that point, I couldn't tell what was going on, where it was coming from. It was really hot that day and it was spraying everywhere. Everything was coated in antifreeze. So I took some pictures and a quick video, and I was a few miles away from a dealer. It was a Sunday, so I just had it brought over there. And it ends up the oil coolant hose, it's a 90-degree bend from the top of the engine and goes down. Right at that 90-degree bend, there was a split. Then about 55 or 56,000 miles, I started having issues where when I would start it, the initial room, when I would turn the key, was just not as strong as it used to be. It sounded pathetic, actually. I ended up purchasing another battery, and the day that I purchased the battery, when I was leaving the parts store, that start was kind of iffy. It almost felt like it wasn't going to click, like it wasn't going to go. It caught, I got it home. Before I put the new battery in, I went to start it and it was dead and wouldn't start. Replaced the battery and everything's been great. One thing I did notice when I was proof watching one of my videos, I had done a scene where I was sitting on a trail with my brake on, the car in gear, and filming my gauges, and I noticed that the voltage gauge dropped way down, like it was hovering around 13.2, 13, and then it dropped way down to like 11.3 or 11.5 just for an instant and then came back. And it did that a couple times where it would go really low and come back. And I believe that that was an indicator that my battery was going bad. So I tried to recreate that with the new battery by stopping on a trail, turning on as much stuff as I could, the heaters and the heating steering wheel and everything else, and that voltage gain barely dropped. Okay, so I am stopped, my foot on the brake, I'm in part-time, and that gauge never drops down really low. Even if I turn things on, the air conditioning's on, I could turn the heated seats, heated steering wheel. Even then, it just doesn't drop low like that. So I'm convinced when my battery was starting to fail, an indication was that that battery voltage gauge, when I would stop at a light or anything, would drop down real quick past 12 volts. Low 12s down into 11s. Typically, with a good battery, my voltage gauge is around 13.2, 13.4. May drop down to 12.8 or something for an instant when things are kicked on, but never went down even close to 11. At that point, I realized that that was an indicator of the battery acting up. So in one of my videos for my old hard rock, my JK hard rock, I had said that one of the best updates that I did on that thing when I bought that one, and at the time I was like, well, do I really want to pay for this and do this? And then after I did it, I realized it was the smartest thing I could have done, was to buy the floor mats. The rubber floor mats, and the ones in this are really nice. Not only do they work well, like I just spilled half a cup of coffee and it just sits there without me having to worry about it until I can, clean it up. It's not soaking into anything. It really does help keep your vehicle looking better. And everybody, oh, it's a Jeep, it doesn't need to look good. Well, the days when I could go out and buy a Jeep for $500 and build it and take it out in the swamps and destroy it are long gone. And Jeeps, especially a 392, are extremely expensive vehicles. You can go out and buy a lot of nice cars for the price of this. To sit there and say that you don't want to try and keep it up is a ridiculous idea unless you plan on keeping it until the end and beating it to death and leaving it to rot in your yard somewhere. Because at some point, if you're going to want to sell it, you're going to want to try and keep it at least a little bit respectable. 66,000, right when it came out of its 65,000 mile warranty. That was the issue with the harmonic balancer pulley weight falling off. So right now I'm at 70,080 miles exactly. About 4,000 miles ago, just when this thing came out of its 65,000 mile warranty, I had an issue where I was leaving work one day and I started up the Jeep and I heard this sound, and all I could describe it was like a zing, a zzz, like something was spinning, like almost like if the fan was free spinning, what it would sound like. So I didn't know, did I lose the belt? I didn't have any kind of messages up or anything, but I immediately shut it off. And after I shut it off, I heard that noise zzz, for another, it seemed like an eternity, but it was probably only a second or two after the vehicle was completely off. So I'm like, now what the heck is going on here? So I popped the hood and I looked down, and at the time that I looked, I thought it was the crankshaft pulley laying on the frame in the bottom there. And I'm like, what in the F? You know, for a crank pulley to let loose, well, at the time I didn't know, I should say, that it was the weight for the harmonic balancer pulley. First thing I did was get a tow truck coming my way because I wasn't sure what was going on. Didn't want to drive it like that. Started calling around to dealerships to figure out where I was going to take it. And while I was waiting for everything to happen, I got on Facebook and I made a post about, hey, this just happened. And somebody got back to me, and his name was Tyler, and for the life of me right now, I can't remember his last name. You can drive it like that for a short distance if you need to. Just the weight from the harmonic balancer, that took a lot of heat off me because I double checked the weight for the harmonic balancer, and it's used for noise. It's not used for vibration. You know, because of the way that a crank works, where you have vibration, you have movement in the x-axis, you have movement in the y-axis, and you also have this torsional rotation. Every time one of the piston fires, you get that torsional rotation, which causes stress as well. So I figured that this was part of something to do with the crankshaft and the bearings, and I'm going to kill them if I drive it without it. Well, it ends up it's just for noise vibration, and you can run it like that. Not advisable, but you can do it. Drove down to my local dealership, and they got me in the next day to take a look at it, which in season here in South Florida, getting into a dealership is next to impossible. The first dealership I called was Galliana up in Fort Myers, because I was up that way when it failed. And they said, well, get it over here. We might be able to look at it in a week or 10 days. I said, you might be able to fix it? He goes, no, we might be able to take a look at it. Obviously, I didn't want to do that. I called the next one, Cape Coral. They were willing to get me in there, that they weren't sure if it was going to be the next day. Again, this is farther from my house than I want it to be. Once I found out I could drive it, I went back into my own neck of the woods and got it to the dealership. They took it the next morning, looked at it that day and said, hey, listen, this is what it is. It's a real PIA job, and we're going to have to order the part. Luckily in Naples, they also have an enterprise dealer right there, so they gave me my rental, worked out the details. I have an extended warranty, $200 deductible, it covered it. Part came in, they did it, and everything up to this point, which has been almost 5,000 miles now, has been good. It ends up that the 392s, for whatever reason, have an issue with the harmonic balancer weight. That's one more thing to add to the list of things that's happened over the course of my ownership of this vehicle, which has not been quite 3 years and about 70,000 miles, coming up fast on 70,000. And it has been great. Can't say enough good things about how a 392 should ride when it's brand new. It should feel like no other Wrangler. 392 wandering. And I guess the first question I have is, wandering compared to what? Compared to a passenger car, or compared to another Wrangler, or compared to a Bronco, or what exactly? I've owned this vehicle from 4 miles. It's a non-XR. I had 35s put on before I left the dealership with it. From the moment I drove this thing, it has been fantastic. I've got 70,000 miles on it, and I'm just now starting to get a little bit of the old JL feel in it when I'm up on the highway. And things are starting to wear out. I beat on this thing pretty good. Like I said in one of my other videos, I beat on my Jeep, so you won't have to beat on yours. I did a lot of testing, off-road plus testing on brake torque function. I did beat on this thing pretty hard. And still, when I'm on the highway, it never feels unsafe. When it was new, this thing would track full from 0 as fast as it could get up to when the speed limiter kicked in, and would never give me a problem. Up on the highway, I would hammer it. It wouldn't wander. It wouldn't feel like it was out of control. None of that. In my opinion, if your 392 is wandering, you've got other issues that you need to look at. Something's wrong. How high do you have your tire pressure set? What kind of tires are you running? Did you upgrade tires? Are you running stock suspension and stock tires? or at least stock size tires. It's really wet down there still. So this is one of the places that I might go just because it's a cool ride. But when it's this wet here, it's going to be really wet in there. And I do not have a winch on it, on this thing, and I am alone right now, so there won't be any going down trails like that today. I'm running stock suspension with 35-inch tires on a non-XR, and it is beautiful. I've been able to hit quite a few 4.5 0 to 60s. Reset. Off-road plus. Shifting right at red line. I blasted up on the highway. I tortured it with brake torques, and it's held up extremely well considering it's a Jeep that goes off-road that I've been playing with, and daily driving as well. So I do use this as my daily driver to get, and it has been great. Can't say enough good things about how a 392 should ride when it's brand new. It should feel like no other Wrangler. There's another gator right there. Let's go over and see if we can sneak up on them. If they don't have this blocked here, we might be able to. If I park and then get out, highly unlikely, but possible. Let's give it a try. Well, he got me. $392, currently at 69,622 miles. Just got back a couple weeks ago from another long distance trip up into the Carolinas, usually 12, 13 hours each way. Vehicle was fantastic, as always, on the highway. It's got the power. I don't have any issues with the way it rides. Comfort level for me is fine. As I said in one of my other videos, I'm not prone to having backaches and back problems and things like that. So for me, it's a great long distance vehicle, and it soaks up highway miles. I mean, it just spits them out. Didn't get to do too much off-roading while I was up there. Things didn't work out that way. But going again here in a few months, so. This is Ockaloochee Slough State Forest. We got a big gator over there. I don't know if that'll come out on this video, but it's cold today. You know, for Florida, it's 51 out in the middle of the day. For South Florida, that's cold. And when you say that to people from around the country, they have to laugh because 51's cold. Yeah, down here, 51 feels a lot colder than it does when you're up north. Ockaloochee Slough State Forest. It's a pretty good sized gator. 8 or 10 feet maybe. He's a big fat boy though. Look at him. He's pretty fat, pretty big. Just hanging out. So this is the canal for Everglades Boulevard, which I'm very surprised they still have this open. Jeep is facing east. GoPro's now looking north. That's south. Gator right there, see him? Oh, he got me. All the gator prints, bird prints.